The morning sun had barely touched the church roof when Evelyn Hart slipped through the back door. Her old boots moved quietly across the dusty floorboards. The white dress she wore, her mother's wedding gown, hung heavy and wrong on her shoulders. Its lace had yellowed with age like everything else she owned. Each step she took wasn't toward happiness, but dread. Through the thin walls came the sound of a crowd gathering, low voices full of gossip and judgment. At 34, widowed for 3 years, she knew what they were whispering. Too old, too plain. Lucky anyone still wants her. The words had branded themselves deep into her soul. Outside, Barnaby Keller's black carriage waited in the sunlight like a hearse. The man himself stood at the altar, checking his pocket watch as if timing a business deal. He hadn't asked for Evelyn's hand. He'd demanded it, announcing to the town that he'd be taking Samuel Hart's widow as payment for her husband's unpaid loans. A practical arrangement, the mayor had called it. A woman needs protection, the preacher had said. Evelyn called it what it truly was, ownership. Her fingers brushed the bruise on her wrist, still tender from the last time Barnaby had grabbed her. His breath had reeked of whiskey as he told her exactly what kind of wife she would be. Obedient, silent, grateful. The church organ began to play, the tune meant for weddings but sounding more like a funeral hymn. Soon they'd notice she wasn't waiting at the altar. Soon they'd come for her. Through the cracked window, she saw Barnaby's men pacing near the carriage. Big Tom Wheeler and Jack Slade, both armed, both loyal. Evelyn's heart pounded. She could stay and be chained for life, or run and take her chances with death. She pressed a trembling hand against the back door. Beyond it lay the pines that marked the edge of town, the wild country no woman dared to cross alone. A death sentence, folks called it. But as footsteps echoed behind her, death felt kinder than what waited at that altar. She lifted her skirts and ran. The forest swallowed her whole. Branches tore at the white gown, leaving scraps of lace and silk hanging like ghosts in her wake. Behind her came the shouts, angry, disbelieving. A woman didn't run from Barnaby Keller. Not in Willow Creek. Evelyn stumbled over a root and fell hard onto the moss. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The dress ripped from neckline to waist, exposing her plain shift underneath. She almost laughed at the sight of it. Barnaby's polished bride turned wild fugitive. The barking of dogs reached her ears. They were tracking her now. Of course they were. Barnaby Keller didn't let debts walk away. She tore the useless gown from her body, leaving only her petticoat and shift. In the cold mountain air, she felt strangely alive. The mountain rose before her, vast, gray, endless. Somewhere up there, she knew, lived the kind of men decent folk whispered about. Men who answered to no law but their own. Evelyn began to climb. Each step scraped her hands raw, but she didn't stop. She wouldn't stop. She'd rather freeze on this mountain than live another day as that man's property. The dogs grew louder, their howls bouncing off the canyon walls. Finally, she reached a stream, icy and fast. She waded in, hoping the current would carry away her scent. The shock of cold stole her breath, but she pressed on until her legs gave out. She collapsed against a rock, shaking uncontrollably, her torn feet bleeding into the water. This was where she would die, she thought. Not in a wedding bed or a debtor's house, but here, alone in the wilderness. The forest stood silent around her, ancient and indifferent. She closed her eyes. "You're bleeding." The voice came from the trees, low, deep, steady as thunder. Evelyn's eyes flew open. A man stood at the edge of the stream. For a moment, she thought he was part of the forest itself. He wore buckskin and fur, a rifle in one hand, his dark hair long and wind-tangled. A mountain man. He didn't move, just watched her. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, held no judgment, only quiet concern. "The dogs," she gasped. "They're behind me." He nodded once. "About a mile back. You threw them off, crossing the water." He stepped closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wild creature. "Not many townfolk would know that trick." "I'm not townfolk," she said fiercely. "Not anymore." Something in his expression changed, a flicker of understanding. He set his rifle against a tree and shrugged off his coat, holding it toward her. "You'll freeze in those wet things." Evelyn stared at him, wary. "Why would you help me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I know who you are, Evelyn Hart." Her blood turned to ice. You know my name?" He nodded slowly. "Your husband saved my life once, Samuel Hart. Found me half dead after a grizzly tore me up. We became friends of sorts. He told me about you. Said if anything ever happened to him, I was to make sure you had a choice." He reached into his shirt and pulled out something on a leather cord, a small wooden carving of a horse. Evelyn gasped. "Samuel carved that. I buried it with him." "No," the man said gently. "He gave it to me 6 months before he passed. Made me promise I'd look out for you." Quote. The sound of barking broke through the trees, again, closer now. He picked up his rifle. "Name's Ransom Mercer. Folks call me Ran. You stay behind that pine. I'll handle Keller's men." Evelyn hesitated. "You'll get yourself killed. Better me than you." The words hit her like a hammer. No one had ever said them to her before. Not even Samuel, kind as he'd been. Through the brush, shadows moved. Wheeler's voice rang out, cruel and loud. "There! I see your tracks!" Rand's voice dropped low. "Get ready to run when I tell you." He stepped into the open, rifle leveled. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn pressed herself against the tree, heart pounding, torn between terror and a strange, fragile hope she didn't dare name. The first shot echoed through the mountains. And that was how Evelyn Hart, widow, debtor, and woman too old for love, met the man who had been waiting for her all along. The echo of gunfire rolled across the valley like thunder. Birds scattered from the trees as Evelyn crouched behind the pine. Heart hammering. Smoke curled through the cold air, and for a terrible moment she thought Ran had been hit. Then his voice cut through the stillness, calm, steady, commanding. "Go back to town, Wheeler, you're trespassing." "Not without the woman," Wheeler called back, his voice hard and mocking. "Barnaby Keller paid good money to have her found." "She ain't his to claim," Ran said evenly. Laughter followed. "Everything in Willow Creek belongs to Barnaby Keller, even the ones that run." The air hung thick with tension. Evelyn peered from behind the tree. Ran stood tall, his rifle steady, his shoulders broad beneath his fur coat. There was no fear in him, only certainty, like the mountain itself, stood with him. A shot cracked through the air, splintering bark above her head. She gasped, ducking lower. Ran fired once in reply, and a man cried out, clutching his hand. "That's your warning," Ran said quietly. "Next one won't be." The silence that followed was heavy. Evelyn could hear the dogs whining, the men whispering among themselves. Then Wheeler's voice again, shaking slightly. "Ain't worth it, boys. Keller'll have our hides if we get ourselves killed." Branches snapped as they retreated, dragging their wounded with them. The dogs went silent, their handlers calling them off. Evelyn didn't move until Rand turned back toward her. "It's clear," he said, lowering the rifle. "For now." She stepped out, legs trembling. "They'll be back." He nodded. "Likely with Keller himself. You'll need somewhere safe till I figure this out." "I can't ask you." "You didn't," he interrupted gently. "Samuel did, long before today." His calmness unnerved her. "You really knew him?" Rand nodded, eyes softening. "He was a good man, saved me when I was half dead, gave me reason to keep living." He looked at her then, something deep and quiet in his gaze. "Told me once he married a woman too strong for her time. Said you'd never need saving, but you might one day need a choice." Evelyn's throat tightened. "He said that?" "He did." They walked together through the thickening forest. Ran led the way, moving like he belonged there, every step sure and silent. The mountains seemed to know him. Evelyn struggled to keep up, her torn feet bleeding through her stockings. "You're hurt," he said after a while, noticing her limp. "I'll manage." He stopped suddenly, turning toward her. "Sit." His tone was firm, not unkind. She sat on a fallen log while he knelt beside her, pulling a small leather pouch from his belt. He cleaned the cuts on her feet with gentle precision. His shirt. She watched him in silence, the simple care stirring something she didn't want to name. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked finally. "Because Samuel asked? Or because you pity me?" Rand's hands stilled. He met her gaze. "I don't pity you, Evelyn Hart. I respect what it takes to run when the whole world says you can't." No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a burden, not as a duty, but as an equal. They reached his cabin by nightfall, tucked deep in the shadow of the mountain. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney. It was a small, sturdy place, built from thick logs and surrounded by pines. Rand opened the door. It's not much, but it's safe. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of pine and smoke. A single lantern flickered on a rough-hewn table. Animal pelts hung from the rafters. It was a man's place. Simple, practical, alive. "You can rest here," he said, setting his rifle aside. "I'll keep watch tonight." Evelyn sank onto the bench by the fire, her body aching with exhaustion. The flickering light caught the lines of her face, the gray at her temples. She looked older than she wanted to, older than she felt inside. "They'll call me a fool for running," she murmured. Rand poured her a cup of warm tea. "Let them. Fools build the world while cowards talk about it." That made her smile, just a little. "You talk like a man who doesn't fear much." "Fear keeps a man alive," he said, sitting across from her. "But it shouldn't keep him small." For a long time they sat in silence. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines. Inside, the fire popped softly. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "Do you really think I have a choice now? Barnaby won't stop. The whole town's on his side." Rand's voice was steady. "Then we make our own side. There's more than one kind of law out here. The one down there belongs to men like Keller. The one up here belongs to those who fight back." She looked at him, unsure whether to feel comfort or fear. "You mean to fight him?" "If I have to." The certainty in his tone made her heart race. "You'll get yourself killed." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I've waited a long time to do something that mattered." Evelyn stared into the fire, the warmth reaching her bones. "I told myself I was too old for love, too old for running, too old for anything but survival." Rand studied her across the flames. "Maybe you were waiting for someone who didn't ask you to be anything but yourself." Her breath caught. "And you think that's you?" He didn't look away. "I think I've been waiting a long time for you to show up." She turned toward the window, unable to hold his gaze. The forest outside was dark, endless, wild, just like what waited inside her chest. For the first time in years, Evelyn Hart wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare her. It felt alive. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance. Rand stood, checking his rifle by habit. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "Tomorrow we see what Keller's really made of." As he stepped outside, Evelyn sat staring into the fire. Her hands still shook, but not from fear anymore. Somewhere between running for her life and finding this quiet cabin, something had changed. Maybe she wasn't too old for love after all. The next morning, frost clung to the window glass like lace. The fire had gone low, and Evelyn woke to the smell of wood smoke and coffee. Rand was already outside splitting logs, his steady rhythm echoing through the still air. For a moment, she simply watched him. The way he moved was different from the men she'd known in town. Strong, yes, but not proud. Every motion had purpose. He wasn't fighting the world, just working with it. When he came back inside, snow clung to his coat. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." Evelyn wrapped the blanket tighter. "Dreamed of them finding me again." Rand poured her coffee into a tin cup and handed it over. "Dreams can't hurt you." "Keller can, though, and he will try." She nodded. "He won't stop till he drags me back. Then we make sure he can't." Before she could ask what he meant, a sharp whistle split the air. Rand froze, then moved to the window. "Raiders," he said grimly. "A lot of them." Evelyn's heart sank. "Barnaby?" "Most likely." He checked his rifle. He brought the town with him. Within minutes, the quiet clearing filled with voices, angry and determined. Through the open door, Evelyn saw them. Men from Willow Creek, faces she recognized from church, from the market. Even the sheriff had come, and at their head rode Barnaby Keller, dressed not for war but for a wedding, his fine black coat pressed and spotless. "Mrs. Hart," he called, his voice smooth and poisonous. "You've caused quite the scandal. Come now, don't make this harder than it has to be." Rand stepped out onto the porch, rifle across his arm. "She's not going anywhere." Quote. Barnaby smiled, thin and sharp. "Ah, Mercer, I should have known you'd crawl out of your hole. Still chasing after another man's wife?" "She's no one's wife," Rand said, "and she's no man's property." Barnaby's voice hardened. "According to the papers, she is. Her husband's debts were signed over to me. That makes her mine by law." "There's no law that sells a woman," Rand said. "Only men too scared to face one who can't be bought." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the townsfolk shifted uneasily. Others nodded in agreement. Evelyn stepped outside before Rand could stop her. "You think you can scare me back into your house?" she called, her voice steady. "You think waving papers makes me yours? I've lived by your kind of law long enough. It's built on fear and lies." Barnaby's expression cracked. "You forget yourself, woman." "No," she said. "For the first time, I remember exactly who I am." "Enough," he snapped. "Sheriff, arrest her. Bring her to town. She's stolen property." The sheriff hesitated. "Mr. Keller, I'm not sure." "I said arrest her." Quote. Before the sheriff could move, Rand raised his rifle, not aiming, just resting it against his arm. His voice was calm but cold. "Any man takes one step toward her and he won't take another." 5-1, Mercer," Barnaby sneered. "You can't shoot us all." "Don't need to," Rand said. "Just need to shoot you." The words landed like a hammer. Evelyn's pulse raced, but she stood her ground beside him. "You'll have to go through both of us, Barnaby." Barnaby's fury boiled over. "You think this ends here? You'll regret defying me." Before anyone could move, a second rifle cracked from the trees. Bark splintered near Barnaby's boots. Then another shot came, and another. From the forest emerged 3 more mountain men. Weathered, silent, steady. They took up positions around the clearing, rifles trained on Keller's riders. Rand didn't look away from Barnaby. "Told you," he said quietly. "You're outnumbered, not me." Barnaby's mask of power slipped. He glanced at his men, some already backing their horses away, others refusing to meet his eyes. "This isn't over," he hissed. Rand nodded once. "No, but you're done for today. Take your men and go." For a long moment, Barnaby hesitated, hate burning in his eyes. Then he jerked his reins and turned his horse. "We'll settle this in town," he spat, "with the law." The mob slowly retreated, muttering. When the last hoofbeat faded, the clearing fell silent again. Evelyn stood trembling. The danger was gone, but the weight of what she'd faced pressed heavy on her. Rand lowered his rifle and turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded shakily. "I don't know what I am." "Alive," he said softly. "And free." Tears burned in her eyes. "I've never been either before." He reached out, brushing his thumb across her cheek, wiping away soot and tears. "You are now." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and smoke. "I told you I was too old for love," she said quietly. Rand's smile was small, but real. "Then it's a good thing. I've been waiting a long time." Something inside her broke and healed all at once. She leaned into him, the cold forgotten, the fear gone. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not because someone claimed her, but because someone saw her. Later, as the fire crackled inside the cabin, she sat beside him, wrapped in his coat. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "you decide what you want. You can stay here, go back to town, head east, anywhere you choose." She looked into the fire. "I've been told what to do my whole life. Maybe it's time I decide for myself." Rand nodded. "That's all Samuel ever wanted for you." Evelyn met his eyes, steady now. "And what do you want?" He hesitated only a moment. "You." The word hung between them, simple, honest, without demand. Evelyn reached for his hand. Then maybe it's time I stop running. He smiled. Welcome home. The snow fell thicker, covering the world in white. Somewhere far below, Willow Creek slept under the same sky, its people still bound by rules Evelyn Hart had finally escaped. But up here, on the mountain, a different kind of law ruled. The law of choice, of freedom, of love found when the world least expected it. And as the firelight danced across their faces, Evelyn realized something she had never believed before. She wasn't too old for love, she was exactly the right age for it.